Hey VC, how's it going? Right, okay, this is a thread response to Sean at SW Studio Productions. So Sean's a really big Bowie fan. About a week or so ago, he uploaded a Bowie vinyl tag video, which I thought was a really good idea. Now, Bowie's one of my favourite artists, but one thing I'll say at the outset is there are much bigger Bowie fans than me. There are much bigger Bowie fans in the VC than me. So this is 10 or 12 questions. And I'm saying this now because you might be a little bit surprised by some of my answers. So see what you think anyway. So right, so question number 1 and question number 2 are tied in. So first Bowie album that I heard and the first Bowie album that I bought. So I'm starting off here. This is a compilation. This is Bowie The Complete Singles collection that came out, I think, in 1993. So this is basically a double disc set. It's about 37, 38 tunes, and it's all the singles up to Day In, Day Out. So you know what you're getting there, very good. But the first studio album that I heard was Ziggy Stardust. So this is part of the reissues that came out in the early 90s. So at this stage, the CDs were released with the full album. But in this case, obviously the album finishes with Rock and Roll Suicide. You've then got 5 extra tracks. So you've got John and Money Dancing, Velvet Goldmine, Sweethead, and then demo versions of Lady Stardust and Ziggy Stardust. So that's how I first heard the album. But I'm not always a big fan of albums being reissued with extra tracks on the end, because it sort of distorts the feel of the album, you know. But to be fair, those 5 tracks work really well. So yeah, that's that. Okay, so my favourite opening track on a Bowie record. So this is a bit of a cheat here, because my favourite Bowie song, full stop, is Young Americans. So that's obviously the opening track on Young Americans, but I'll come back to that album in a bit. So I'm going to go with Lodger and the opening track, Fantastic Voyage. Now, to be fair, you could pick any one of Bowie's albums for a strong opening track. He always is almost like a statement of intent with David Bowie on all his records. They all start off really strongly, whatever album you look at, and this is no exception. But perhaps when you think about the so-called sort of Berlin trilogy, I think that Heroes and Low get a lot more attention than this record, and I do think that Fantastic Voyage as a track is one of his best songs, so that's why I picked that. Right, so my favourite closing track on the Bowie album. Now, to be perfectly honest, quite the opposite of what I've just said about his opening tracks. I'd never think that the final track on his records is necessarily the strongest track. I mean, even those classic records like Ziggy Stardust and Hunky Dory. Hunky Dory, for example, finishes with the Bewley Brothers. Personally, I'd rather take any other track on that album than the Bewley Brothers. It's a great track, but it's probably my least favourite on that album. Same with Rock and Roll Suicide on Ziggy Stardust. It's a great track once again, but is one of my least favourites on that record. So, and that's often the case with his records. So I'm going with this. This is Outside from 1996. And it finishes with Strangers When We Meet. And the reason why I picked it is because that particular song, I think, is probably the strongest track on that album. And that's the only instance where I can think of a time where Bowie has finished his album with arguably the best track. Yeah, it's a great pop tune. It was a single, but perhaps something that is now overlooked. So if you haven't heard that, definitely worth checking out again. This album itself, Outside, it's a bit of a weird album. It's not an easy listen. It's a concept record, but it does have some really strong stuff on it. But for me, Strangers With Me is the best track. Okay, my favourite Bowie song on a soundtrack would be The Bud of Suburbia. So he did the soundtrack for the TV series, which was done for the BBC in the early 90s. Obviously, it's the TV version of the Hanif Kureishi novel. Now, I haven't seen the TV programme nor read the book for 20-25 years. I'm sort of hoping that this album gets a reissue this year. I think it may well do. I think it's probably part of the reissue campaign. But I'd love to see the programme again as well. So yeah, that's my answer for that one. Okay, my favourite song covered by Bowie. So I'm going to go with the Heathen album from 2000. This came out, and the second track on this album is Cactus, which was originally done by the Pixies. Now, I think Bowie does a great version. Now, I'm not always a big fan of Bowie's cover versions. So you think about Across the Universe on Young Americans, or Let's Spend the Night Together. They're all right versions, but they're usually the sort of weakest moment on those albums, whereas I think with Cactus and actually all of the covers on this record, they're all great. They all work really well with the album as a whole. So yeah, I think this is one of his, you know, certainly post Scary Monsters, this is probably his best record, but yeah, nice stuff. Favourite collaboration, right, this is an easy one because it just enables me to show this album again. So this is Queen's Hot Space, which of course finishes with Under Pressure. Now, I've always loved Under Pressure. It was the #1 single in the UK. And what I like about it is that it doesn't really sound like a Queen or a Bowie song, you know. You can see there's equal amount of input in there, you know. It's yeah, it's a thing that stands alone on its own. It doesn't really fit on this album either, you know. It's sort of tagged on the end, but yeah, great tune and still something I play a lot, so cool. Right, an overlooked Bowie track. Now this is a single that came out I think in '97. This is I Can't Read. Now the track was originally featured on the Tin Machine album, the first Tin Machine album, and this is a reworked version. It's more of a stripped down version that was used in the film The Ice Storm, the Ang Lee film, which I think came out in '97. And I love this. This is just a beautiful version. I think it's come out on compilations since then, but yeah, perhaps a track which deserves a bit more attention. Okay, my favourite era, as I said, my favourite album is Young Americans. However, I was born in the mid-70s, so all of those 70s albums, that run of perfect albums that he had, I heard years later in the 90s. And in the 90s, that's when I bought all my Bowie records and Bowie CDs. But I loved the albums that he put out in the 1990s. Those are the records that I bought on the day release. They're the ones that I look forward to being released and look forward to hearing. And those are the records that I played to death when they came out. So stuff like Outside, Earthling, Hours, Heathen I've already shown, Reality into the early 2000s. What's strange about that, of course, is the fact that most Bowie fans at that point weren't interested in what he was doing then. I always found it ironic, the fact that, you know, Bowie fans will tell you he was wonderful because he kept changing, he was, you know, chameleon-like, you know, he kept changing his sound and doing different things. However, when he got to the 1990s, I think, you know, 90% of Bowie fans just wanted him to sound like he did in the 1970s. You know, it's being a Bowie fan in the 90s was very similar to being a Prince fan. I'm a big Prince fan as well. And similar with Prince, you know, he got to a stage in the late 90s, as with Bowie, people just weren't interested. You know, it was a funny time for two artists who are now almost like, you know, saint-like figures, whereas at that point they couldn't sell records and they couldn't sell concert tickets, so it was a strange time. But right, sorry, my iPad ran out of battery there, so I think I'm up to the last question. I've been talking to myself for about 10 minutes, so I don't know how much of that got on there, but there you go. Right, okay, so have you seen Bowie live? Yep, so I saw Bowie 4 times live. So first time I saw him in 1996 was on the Outside tour. Now this seems quite strange saying this now, but I didn't actually buy the tickets. This gig was sponsored by Twix, the chocolate bar, and I think you had to save up 5 or 6 chocolate bar wrappers to get a ticket to see Bowie. There were 4 bands on that day. I can't think who the second band was. It opened with Echo Belly. Then there's another band, I can't think who it was. Then it was Alanis Morissette, and then it finished with Bowie. I think he played an hour set. But, you know, what I said before about people not being interested in Bowie in the 90s, the place was half full. You didn't actually have to buy a ticket. People couldn't even be bothered to buy 5 chocolate bars, like £3 or something, to go and see David Bowie. I mean, it seems crazy now. I mean, anybody would do that now. But there you go. The place was half empty. That was at Birmingham NEC. And what I remember about that gig was halfway through, he played the track Hello Space Boy, which was a track from the Outside album. And when he finished it, he almost apologised to the audience because he explained they were going to play the song again because they're filming it for a video. It was going to be a single. But the second time they played it exactly the same, but Bowie was just throwing that many more sort of rock star shapes and giving it all the moves and that, so which was quite amusing. It did come out as a single, but not with that video. It was a different version that came out, and it was a remix by the Pet Shop Boys, which is slightly different, but that was interesting. I then saw him play in Birmingham at a small capacity club, less than 1,000 people, in the Q Club in Birmingham in '97, which was a brilliant gig. Probably one of the main moments that I remember from any gig was David Bowie coming out that night. I was about 15 foot away from him. He came out on his own, stripped to the waist, just wearing baggy white linen trousers, carrying an acoustic guitar, and he walked up to the mic and he sang Quicksand from Hunky Dory, which was just incredible. And then the band came out and they played most of Earthling. Earthling was the album at that time, the drum and bass type thing. The other thing that I remember from that gig was that they played Fashion, which was performed with a video screen behind it with just lots of porn films cut up and cut together. It is really incredibly graphic, and there was no reference to it on the night. It was just totally out of the blue, and that was only for that one song, then it changed, whatever. And it was only about 10 years later, I read an interview with him where I think it was sort of, you know, listeners' questions or something. And somebody said, I was at this gig in Birmingham in 1997, and you played to this bizarre montage of porn clips. And he just explained that it was done by the road crew. The road crew wanted to do it, so he just let them get on with it, and they performed Fashion to that. So totally strange. But the final time I saw him twice in 2002 on the Reality tour. I've got a bootleg of one of the gigs. It was a Birmingham NEC. So this is from the 20th of November 2003. It's a 28 song set, and the sets were perfect because he would play a couple of hits, then he would play a couple of tracks from the previous few albums, and so on and so forth. That's what he did. But these are the sort of classic tunes that he played in amongst that 28 song set. Rebel Rebel, Sister Midnight, Fame, China Girl, All the Young Dudes, The Man Who Sold the World, Under Pressure, Life on Mars, Ashes to Ashes, Changes, Heroes, Fantastic Voyage, 5 Years, Hang On To Yourself, Ziggy Stardust. It was an absolutely incredible show. So I saw 2 nights of that, but absolutely brilliant. Needless to say, I sat next to a guy who walked out halfway through. Not only did he walk out, so I wasn't too far from the stage. I sat at the side of the stage. David Bowie played a track, which is a closing track on Reality, called Bring Me the Disco King. It's quite a slow jazzy number. At the end of the song, when the music just finished, this guy stood up and called David Bowie a wanker and walked out. And David Bowie was visibly shocked because he looked over. The guy was sitting next to me at the time, and he looked over, and you could see that after nothing but adulation all night, for somebody to stand up and call him a wanker was, you know, what was unexpected to say the least. But there you go. Anyway, cheers.